a sound check?
Check.
Sound check.
Check, testing. Is it good?
Both cameras are live.
Thank you so much. If you want, you can take this question 5 and transition into the tools.
Okay.
You can, I'm not trying to tell you how.
Yeah, that's good. Let's do that.
Yeah, okay, cool.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Let me just sit back now.
Take your time. Yeah, I'm over here crying, but no, let me finish this. You're on point. I appreciate you. You're definitely on point. So we're back, and thank you so much for everything so far. This has been amazing. You're doing a phenomenal job. Can you share with me some success stories from your work or highlight the impacts of positive discipline?
Yeah. So I was working with a couple that had a son that they were very frustrated with him because he was not listening to them, particularly in the morning routine. And this was a child who was really a very astute little person, just understanding a lot of things, was reading, maybe a grade above, maybe 2 grades, I can't remember, but, and so they were in the morning routine is really hard. Everybody's trying to get out of the house, you got to get breakfast, you got to get dressed. And so they were getting angry and yelling. So we just bringing the awareness to what's happening in the morning when they started kind of losing it. And also the reasons how come the child was not listening, like what was going on with the child in those moments. So we looked at things like, routines, developing routines, creating those routines with your child so that the child, when you do that with your child, you're getting buy-in, just like we do in companies. When you sit down and create these routines with your child and write them out and perhaps put some pictures, whatever helps the kid to understand kind of what needs to be happening in the morning, you're going to start increasing cooperation. You're going to start seeing more of what you need and want from that child. So that's a strategy that simple, but creating routines that parents can do, that these parents started doing, and that started working for them. The other thing is a tool called Take Time for Training, which means, it's hard for us to understand sometimes the mindset of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old. They don't have the same competencies that we have, and we really do forget that. We think that they know what it means to, gather the dishes from the table and put them in the sink. They don't actually necessarily know what that means the way that you want it done. So you do have to take time to, in a calm manner, explain to your child what you want them to do, and show them. It's the modeling, it's doing it together. You can make it fun. So take time for training, and it's simple, but a lot of parents, we don't do it. So that's another tool that can be in your toolbox. And when these parents started doing that, they also started seeing, more cooperation. The other really big one that's important for parents, that I needed to get this down when my kids were teens. So the hardest periods, they say, are when your kids are toddlers and then teens. In many ways, it's a similar state. They're different, but developmentally they're different, but they have parallels in that in the toddler years, a kid is starting to express their desire for autonomy. Let me do it. Well, guess what? It's the same thing in the teen years. Let me do it. They're really coming into their autonomy, their independence, their sovereignty. They know a lot, but they're still young, in their teen years. So you get a lot of pushback as parents. It's from them. It's very challenging to navigate those teen years. And so I know I needed to learn this, and then I saw it with this couple with their son. Their son was older than a toddler, but where you start losing it as a parent. And there's a tool It's actually taught by Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist down in LA, and it's called Brain in the Palm of the Hand. It's a simple little process, but it explains a lot to us. So it's that if you think of your hand as a brain, this is like the brain stem, the fingers are your prefrontal cortex, and this is where the center, your prefrontal cortex, has all your judgment, your moderating of emotions, your learning goes on in the prefrontal cortex, all of your executive functions, so planning, those sorts of things, time management. And then underneath is the more primitive part of the brain, which is the amygdala and the hippocampus, and those are the emotional centers, the more primitive emotional centers that protect us in times of danger. So this is also the center of fright, flight, flee, or faint, I think is what they call it. So this is where we react. These are our emotional reactions. The prefrontal cortex is what helps moderate that. So in positive discipline, we talk about when your buttons get pushed as a parent, and they will, we often will flip our lid, right? We're angry. Everything's gotten triggered in us. Our neurochemicals are, putting out stuff that's making us angry, and we are no longer accessing the prefrontal cortex, which helps us to moderate emotion, and again is the center of judgment and learning. So when your lid is flipped, this is not the time to try to instruct your child in something. It is not the time to try to negotiate with your child. It is not the time to try to set a limit with your child. So take a break. And that's the lesson. It's like when lids are flipped, this is not the time to be engaging. So you can do that when things are calmer, but that's a really important lesson. And parents don't always recognize when our lids are flipped. We're not even aware. So just becoming conscious of like, oh, whoa, I just flipped my lid. So then find a way to re-regulate. So much in life is about re-regulating our emotions, coming back to a place of centeredness. And the other thing is that we're also actually modeling this for our kids. So when we're grounded and centered, so there's new research on what's called co-regulation. So in interpersonal relationships, we are co-regulating our emotional kind of feeling inside, our centeredness. We co-regulate with the people around us. And so if you're calm and centered, you're modeling that for your kid, but you're also actually co-regulating so that they're experiencing greater calm. When your lid is flipped, you're modeling that for your kid, and the chances are you're going to be co-regulating that with your kid. So then you've got a household, so high conflict households, this is where people's lids are flipped. So learning how to get grounded and centered, not engaging when your lid is flipped, taking a break. They call it self-soothing, so learning how to self-soothe, getting back to center. Then you can go back and you can readdress that, you can address that issue, whatever it was. And this works with spouses also. Not a good idea to engage when both your lids are flipped, because you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, sometimes people need to do that just to kind of vent and release some energy. And sometimes that's effective. I mean, I know like my husband and I, sometimes I think, we're better now, but in the past there were just times where it was like, we were just venting. We just needed to release some energy, but we're better now. We're way better now because we've learned these skills. So co-regulation, flipping your lid, getting calmer, learning how to do that stuff is so important as a parent and in relationship. And one other thought about that, when we talk about trauma-informed parenting, so people who've had a lot of trauma in their childhoods, or the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, right? They're more primitive centers of the brain, the amygdala, all of that, have been on heightened alert. There might be a vigilance there, or a hairpin kind of reactivity to things, right? Their buttons might get punched more easily, or they might just have a vigilance with them all the time because they had to. It was protective for them. So they're more sort of, amped up, just normally in terms of their kind of their own regulation, emotional regulation. So that impacts, how the person who has that past trauma is impacting with other people around them. It impacts how they're relating to other people around them. So that's where, learning more about yourself, self-knowledge, know thyself, what are your triggers, learning how to self-soothe, recognizing when your lid is flipped, all of these things will benefit your relationship with your child, your parenting, your relationship with your spouse, and strengthening your partnership.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
I do want to piggyback on asking one last question, because you talk about people flipping their lids getting flipped.
Mm-hmm.
I like to just challenge it a little bit further on the sensations that they're feeling in their body when the emotion is coming up. I think I think a lot of times we broaden what's happening, but everybody is experiencing something different.
Mm-hmm.
In their body, the sensations are different. Anything that you can say to parents so that they can notice that, like maybe what the sensation may feel like, where it may, like how do they know when their spidey senses are tingling,
Mm-hmm.
when it's time to, like, when you're over the top. But
right.
What about a preventative, like you said, knowing yourself will assist you get there, but is there any bodily sensations that you can attest to? You don't have to if you don't.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. One of the things, like I know probably for myself and in my family too, is just if you find that you want to speak more and you want to tell people things, right? Because there's something in you that's like, no, I've got something to say, like that urge, that might be a sign to take a step back and observe yourself a little bit more. And also another teaching in positive discipline is ask, don't tell. So, I was in a bad habit of telling my teenagers what to do, and that did not work. So I had to learn the skill of asking. And when you start asking, it's fascinating what happens, because a lot of times the person you're asking the questions, they will figure it out themselves. They will self-correct. So that's a big transition for parents. Asking, not telling. We're doing so much telling. So I think sometimes that sensation of like kind of wanting to interject or speak up or, say something, you can feel that in your body. You can notice it in your behavior. And then in terms of like other sensations you might feel in your body, I think for people that are coming from more traumatic backgrounds, you might feel bereft, a sense of bereftness, a sense even of emptiness, maybe or really shut down inside. So I think some people, it just depends kind of what happened to you, your experiences growing up and what you've learned, what was modeled for you, how you were co-regulating with the people around you. There can be, for some people, a sense of like a cliff, that like, it's just feels awful. Mm-hmm. So alone, so alienated and just alone in this work, in these struggles. And an important teaching that is not a teaching of positive discipline, but it's a couple teaching. So it's not a parenting teaching, but it's more for couple support, is it's from John and Julie Gottman. They're both psychologists. John Gottman, he's been a marriage researcher for, I think, about 40 years. He's at University of Washington, I believe it is. And it's a concept called turn towards. So he talks about, you can have an entire weekend with your partner and not have one moment of intimacy. Oh my God. Are you serious?
Is that what it means?
Do you want to just try
Take a second.
pushing it? That's so bizarre. Why is that happening? Oh my God, that's never happened before. It's so weird.
Yeah, you're fine.
That's crazy. Thank you.
Still rolling?
Yeah, we got 15% on it.
Okay, so so this concept by John and Julie Gottman is called turning towards. So you can have a whole weekend of intimacy. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. So this concept is called turning towards. It's by John and Julie Gottman, and it's referring to the fact that partners can, be together. They could spend a whole weekend together and not have a moment of intimacy. So you're in the same house. One of you is watching TV. The other might be, be on the computer. Somebody may watch a show late at night. Somebody else may take a bath. And you can go through this whole weekend and never really touch down with each other. And he talks, about that's a problem. Like, you need to create connection with your spouse. You need to create that intimacy. And so turning towards, a lot of times when we feel at a loss with either the parenting struggles or maybe something at work, partners can get in the habit of turning away from their spouse or their partner. And when you do that, you're starting to lay tracks down for that sort of continued behavior. It creates greater distance in the relationship over time. So this idea of turning towards, you have to start turning towards each other. And it can be really hard because you make yourself vulnerable. And your partner may not know how to sort of be there for you when you're turning towards. You're trying to turn towards, but maybe they're doing or saying something really stupid in the moment. So how can you turn towards them? So then you got to work through that stuff. So it's work. It's work. It's always going to be work to learn how to create better connections with your spouse, and certainly also our children. But this turning towards is a really important practice that we need to be doing with our partners.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much because it hits home. Before you were telling us about this practice, you were mentioning asking
Yes.
teen children.
Yeah.
My last question for you, and I'm not misquoting this question, because I know initially I told you that I would ask you what advice would you give younger self.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But I want to switch it up, and if you could actually ask your younger self some advice right now, what would you go back and ask yourself? What kind of advice would you ask from yourself, your younger self?
So
at any age?
like asking versus telling my younger self? Wow. That's a good question. I might say something like, in my teen years, what are your biggest struggles right now? What are you not getting that you see around you? But I might want to do a lot of telling too. In my 20s, I might ask myself, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And what might your life be like if you don't go down this road? Because we really do come to these places, right, where we make choices, and our life changes because of them dramatically. So the choice to get married is a big choice. It's a scary choice. The choice to have children, and it should be a choice, it's a big decision. So, yeah, I think probably always asking yourself, what is it that I want? What is it that I'm afraid of? What's holding me back? What can I do differently to make things better for myself and for the people around me?
And what advice would they give you to where you are right now? Maybe 20 or whatever, in your age.
Now?
Like, what would they get? What kind of advice would they say to you?
Right now, they would say.
If they was in the room looking at you.
Oh my God.
How would they motivate? What would they ask you? What would they tell you?
I think they'd be like, whoa, you did this? Are you kidding me? And wow, I would say, I had to give up some things. I did. I gave up some things, but I gained so much. And it isn't the things that were taught in school to value and to treasure. Having a career is really important, and women do need to have careers, and we all need to have careers. And sometimes you might have to downshift, and that's a decision, that every family does have to make together on their own, how they're going to do that, if they decide to do that. So there's a lot of choices along the way that you can make, and I think, my younger self, my 20 self would just be like, I cannot believe you did this, and how did you do this? How did you do this? Yeah, and I would say I did it by keeping an open heart, keeping an open mind. I had to let go of a lot of stuff, a lot of fear, being able to tolerate your own fear, keeping your heart open to the possibilities, making yourself vulnerable, and courage. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this beautiful interview. Just look in the cameras, tell them who you are and where they can find you on social media.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Lisa Krausz. I'm a parent and couple educator and coach. And you can find me at mapwisdom.com.
It's cut.
Thank you. Oh my God, that was